Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I am an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. If you'd like to know more about my knitwear designs, please check in the description below. And there you will find a link to my Ravelry page where you can see all of the patterns you can purchase for yourself and knit up and have a pretty piece. Also in the description below, you will find a link to the Watch Barbara Knits Facebook group. We would love to have you come over and join so that we can continue the conversations that we have and begin here on the YouTube channel. For you today, I have an answer to a question that was posed on another video. I believe it was one of the small tiny shawl videos, the crescent one. And the question was, how can I tell the right side and the wrong side of my knitting? And I am making the assumption that this is during the time you are actually knitting, because a lot of times, you know, we don't have time to just sit down and finish the entire piece, so you put it down and you pick it back up, and sometimes it is a challenge to tell, did I finish on a right side or did I finish on a wrong side? I mean, you always think that you're gonna remember that but you don't necessarily do that. A few things, I want to give you some tips on keeping track. First, you can use row counters. Like this is a row counter and this is a row counter. This is a cool one that you wear. It's digital and you wear on your thumb and it advances. You can use things like this and keep track of, or you know, something as simple as a pen and paper, and keep track of what row you're on. That can be helpful. One thing I always recommend, especially if you're doing a piece that's very textured and it's hard to tell right side versus wrong side, always on garter, use a locking stitch marker, and after you've finished a few rows, attach that stitch marker to the right side of your work so that you always know which side is right side, wrong side, because it's easy to forget. But let's say you haven't done anything or your marker fell off and you need to figure it out. That is what this video is about. One thing to start with is when you're reading your pattern. Most of the time, patterns start on the right side. Not 100% of the time, read your pattern. Frequently what it'll say is like row 1 and then in parentheses RS, which means right side. So what that's telling you is your odd number rows are your right side rows. And usually then it'll say 2 and WS, so that tells you wrong side. Okay, sometimes you'll run into a pattern where there's like a setup row or the first row says WS. That means you're starting on the wrong side, but then they'll start the numbering with 1 on the right side. So that's why you sometimes get setup rows, because they're wanting to keep odd numbers rows being your right side rows. But that's not always the case. So as always, read your pattern and your pattern will tell you what is the right side and the wrong side. Mark accordingly. Typically, most of your work happens on your right side. So if you're doing yarn overs and knit two togethers and things like that, that is typically going to happen on your right side, with your wrong side being predominantly just a purl or a knit row. But then again, that's not always the case, and there are more advanced work like lace work on both sides. But honestly, if you're doing that kind of work, I'm guessing you might already know how to tell the right side from the wrong side, and that's not really who this video is aimed at. And honestly, when you get into things like garter and texture patterns that pretty much are reversible and look the same from both sides, it is really hard to tell sometimes what is right side and wrong side. That's why I like the locking stitch marker and row counters. But if you don't have those, then what I have here is I've shot some video showing you how you can figure out which side is which if you've put it down and walked away. Stockinette is probably one of the easiest fabrics to be able to tell which is the right side and which is the wrong side. This is the right side of the fabric, the stockinette side, and what you need to look for is this is your knit stitch. And you see how it makes this V? So you've got your stitch, and you can actually follow your stitch. Let me show you. You can follow your stitch. See, it goes from here, it goes up, it goes there, and then it comes down, and then it goes through there, You see where it is behind there? And you can follow your yarn the whole way. But this V here, see how it keeps on coming down? That is showing you that you are looking at the knit side of your knitting, which is frequently your right side. This is reverse stockinette because all you're seeing is the back side of the knit, and all you're seeing are these purl bumps. You look here and you see the V has gone. It's just purl bump, purl bump, purl bump, and you can still follow your thread. It goes here and then up, and it goes under here, down, under here. You see how it keeps on weaving in and out? That is your purl stitch. This is the purl bump. It's kind of like you've got your little guy, your stitch, he's wearing a little necktie right there. He's got a little collar. So on stockinette, this is the right side and this is the wrong side. Now, I want to point out that if you were knitting in reverse stockinette, this would be the right side. I know that makes it a little bit more confusing, but you need to know what you're knitting, and that is why you need to look at your pattern, and it should say right side, wrong side, so you know where you're starting. So that is in stockinette, and that is your easiest way to tell. Now, let's go to the most challenging. And you know what? I just put this down upside down. Now, how can I tell that I am looking at the wrong side here? Well, that is because I know that this panel right here is supposed to be a stockinette. And I'm looking at these purl bumps. It is reverse stockinette, right? So I flip this over. This is the right side because I see the stockinette. If you can see it right here, you can see you've got those V shapes. But this is garter. Garter, when you're working flat, is knit every row, and what you see is you see both knit and purl bumps on both sides of your work. You can see that? If you are working only in garter with no shaping, telling the right side from the wrong side, unless you mark it at the very beginning, is nearly impossible, okay? But if you're working something that has both stockinette and garter, you can determine which is right side and which is wrong side by finding where your stockinette is. Once you've determined which is the right side and which is the wrong side, get yourself a locking stitch marker and lock it onto the right side. Let me pull his little lobster clasp dude down here. He doesn't want to cooperate with me right now. There we go. See? I've locked it on, and you can see now anytime I want to know if I was knitting on this, when he's on the front, I know this is the right side. I'm going to unlock him so I don't lose him because he's my cute little bear guy. Okay. Now, here you can see stockinette, reverse stockinette. This is the wrong side. This is the right side. The only reason I can tell in the garter, if I just saw this, it'd be really tough to tell what's right side, wrong side, but because the stockinette is here, it helps me. The most challenging thing is if you're working in all garter, because garter looks the same on both sides. Now, here's hoping that you do have some kind of work going on. Like with any of my shawls, there's usually a selvage or an edging. And at that point, what you need to do is okay, I've got my yarn coming off here, but is this the beginning of the row or the beginning of the right side row or the end of the right side row? How do you figure that out? Well, look for any additional work that is being done on that row. And here what we have is a yarn over. And I wanted to show you this. This is what a yarn over looks like on the needle when you haven't worked it yet. So if you look at your pattern and you see the instructions on your pattern, you will see that the instructions were knit 1, knit 2 together, yarn over, and your yarn over is here. And then you work, so you can see that these yarn overs are on your needle, which means that this is the correct way to look at it, with the yarn coming off this side, so you know you just finished a right side row. Now, if you were to be working this same thing and you looked at your row and there were no yarn overs on the row, you would know that you had just finished a wrong side row because you don't see any yarn overs. Now, if you don't have any yarn overs in your pattern, but you do have a little bit of shaping, what you can go is look down in your pattern and see if you can find any shaping stitches. And what you can find are either knit 2 togethers or any decreases. So if you look here carefully, you can see right here where this is a knit 2 together. See how you've got this one stitch going over the other stitch? Knit 2 together. Now, where these 2 stitches overlap, that is a wrong side row because you knit together on the right side row. So this stitch coming out of the knit 2 together is a right side row stitch. So then you know this is a right side, and then this is a wrong side, and the one on your needle is a right side. So what you have to do is count up and figure out where you are. So if you're working in garter and you've lost track of right side, wrong side, what you need to do is look for any shaping or anything like that. If all you're doing is knitting garter, if you're literally knitting a square in garter with no shaping and no yarn overs, you know what? It just really doesn't matter which side's the wrong side or the right side because it's just garter. I hope that helped at least a little bit. I can make more videos on this subject if it didn't quite clarify it for everyone. Please let me know in the comments below if you have any more questions that I can work on. As I said, this video is in reaction to a response to a question that was asked on a video. And if you ask a question that I really think would make a great video, then I will totally do that. It's great. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, click that like button, give it the thumbs up. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to the channel. There's a button down here, and push the little bell, select notifications, and it will notify you when I upload a new video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.